Right. I didn't come as far as Australia, but we came pretty far too. So, yeah, Jersey girl, come see us if you're ever in town. And you guys are in for a real treat with these speakers we have this weekend, Paula, Jimmy, and Katie. If there's anything I know is all three of them have such a love for Alcoholics Anonymous. And that love is contagious. You're going to hear that all weekend, especially with our speaker tonight, Paula. I'm proud to introduce a woman with 45 years, right? 45 years, a woman of grace and dignity whose love for Alcoholics Anonymous shows in everything she does. And she's going to get our party started for us this weekend. So let's give it up for Paula P. in steps 1 and 2.
Good to see you. You're a natural.
Kelly, once I start.
Hello, Toronto. Paula Parton, alcoholic. I started my timer so you guys would like me when I'm done. I am happy to be here. Happy to be here with my friends and my new friends and the other speakers and a sponsee's calling in, but I'm not going to answer it. One time I was in Tulsa this year, and I keep my time on my phone, and Polly called in, and I'm like, it's Polly. They said, answered. I said, no, I'm not. That's my sponsor, Polly Crystal, but. And they said, no answer. I said, okay. So I pick it up. I said, Polly, Tulsa wants to say hello. And then they're like freaking out. But if she calls in tonight, I'm not going to do that. But my sobriety date is October 29th, 1979. I took my first drink when I was 14 years old, and I took what I didn't know would be my last drink when I was 17 years old. And I don't know if I've ever met anybody who knew when they took their last drink that was what it was going to be. And then what happened, man? 1 minute, we take that drink, and no matter how well we've rationalized it, no matter how well we can talk it away, just one more that'll work this time, we still know the destruction it has brought us and to the people in the world around us. We do know. So 1 minute, we take that drink. 1 minute later, none of us have ever taken another drink as long as we have been alive. What happened for me was you. I'm going to start this in Bill's story, and you guys all know the history. I'm just going to set it up real quick. You know, Bill had been trying to making stabs at getting sober, not successfully. Life was coming to some dark places, and he got a call from his old friend, Ebby. And Ebby was going to be in town. He was sober. That was weird, but who cares, right? Still going to get to talk about the old days, sit there and get drunk, even if he's by himself. That's all right. So here's what happened. The door opened, and he stood there, fresh-skinned and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? Now, if Bill could go back and turn that small s in something to a large S, he'd be able to answer his own question about what had just happened. And I want to tell you a weird thing. The day before I took my first drink and somebody would have asked me, will you ever drink? I'd have said no. If there would have been a lie detector test, I'd have passed the test. By the time I took my first drink, I was ready for it to be done. I'd grown up in my mother's alcoholism, no shade on her. She was under the lash of the same lash that we were on, yeah. I was just ready for it to be over. And a strange thing to say is this, is that alcohol saved my life until it didn't. I was court mandated to go to my first meeting at 14 years old. I'd grown up in cool California. My mother had moved us to Nebraska. What is that? Where she got sober. And she had been going to meetings for 2 years, and almost to the day she started meetings, I fell in love with my first drink, which was 3 bottles of wine. And I don't need to explain what happened. You know what happened next. All of a sudden, I met a power beyond my wildest dreams. All of a sudden, I was in a fourth dimension. All of a sudden, life had come to mean something at last. That first drink for us. And I was the last of 5 damaged kids, from the end of her drinking. And she wanted to make good on me, man. You know the shame of a mama. You know the shame of a daddy who brought their babies through that. You know. My mom had that, man. She wanted to make it good on me, but I'd fall in love with that liquid demon. There was no stopping me now. And then I was court mandated, 14 years old, to go to my first meeting, and all those people loved my mom. They hated what I was doing to her, so I went down there thinking I was all cool with my tattooed big toes, which I gave myself in juvie, but so stupid. But anyway, it hurt too. But anyway. one was the Rolling Stones lips, and then the other was the Blue Oyster Cult hook cross. Like, what? Please. Anyway, so I'm going down to my first meeting, and I know those people are going to come for me, man, because they love my mom, and they knew this. I could try to kill my mom with a homemade flamethrower. How nice is that? And so I'm going down the steps, and I'm just waiting. You know how you braced up, you think you're all cool. And so I'm at the bottom of those tiny little steps in that nothing little clubhouse, which was an old church in Grand Island, Nebraska. And I'm at the bottom of the steps, and I'm waiting for them to come for me. And across the room was like the Grand Poobah of Alcoholics Anonymous in Nebraska. Like, who wants that for a title, apparently? But anyway, it's a thing. And I knew he particularly was going to come for me, so I'm all braced up, ready for it. And he's way across the room, and he's bent over, and he's talking to somebody. And that was in 1976. And as I tell the story, it's as if I am standing there right now. I'm watching him. He turns his head and he sees me. And he smiles. And he stood up and put his hand out and crossed that entire room to greet me. Like I was a person or something. And I didn't stay sober for the next 3 years, though I was mandated to go to a bunch of meetings in those 3 years. So in 3 years of going to meetings till I finally got sober and I was 17, I don't remember a word that was said. But when I got to my first sacred maybe, at that space, just before the first step, about to take my first inroad, maybe even me could do this. I didn't remember a word that was said, but I remembered how they had made me feel. Because I saw something with a capital S. I'm going to jump forward. I'm going to tell a hot second about life right now. I have 3 children, 3 grown sons. I had them far into my sobriety. I had my first son when I was 13 years sober. He's 32 years old now. And since he was 19 years old, he has stood at the jumping off place. He has a pretty marked mental health disorder as well. A year ago tomorrow, he reached out and he said, "Mom, my anxiety is off the charts. I don't know what to do." I said, "Well, come on over and, we'll go to the clinic and see what's up." And why he could call me is because for 10 years I've only talked about Netflix and Marvel superhero theory. You know what I mean? Build the bridge, keep it built. So we go to the clinic, they take his blood pressure, 188 over 115, and they said, "You go into the emergency room." He didn't smell like alcohol, nothing. He told me later his last drink had been just 7 hours before that. So we go to the emergency room. The doctor, for some reason, asked him, "How much do you drink?" And for some reason, he told the truth, which was 12 to 14 shots of vodka every night till he blacks out. She said, "This is not your anxiety, you're an alcohol withdrawal." A 31-year-old man, only 7 hours from his last drink. That was the effect. That's the place that he was. So they put him in ICU, phenobarbital, in a padded bed while he went through his withdrawals, and then the hallucinations began. He had tried to get sober a year before that, and it all circled around Dave Pistol's death. We got to my sponsor's house the day Dave died, and my son happened to wear the same size clothes and shoes as Dave, and so we looked down that day at the emergency room when he was getting admitted to ICU. He says, "These are Dave's shoes." So we get them out of there after 4 or 5 days. We'd heard about a homeless shelter down in Louisville that gets guys off the street sober. So we drop them off there, turn around and go home. We go see him a week later. He comes up to me. He says, Mom, did you know this is a homeless shelter? I said, honey, you're homeless. I don't even notice. But and so he says, these guys are hard men. I don't have anything in common with these guys. He said, they want me to stay for the 9-month program. I'm getting out of here in the 45-day program. And you know, my whole insides are going, but I'm going, okay, that might work for you. So we sit down, and how it works in that place is, they just pretty much go to meetings and have people take them through the steps, like bushwhack AA, man. I love it, So the guy speaking was this gang guy from the streets, been through prison, a hard homeless life and junkie and all that stuff, like nothing in common with my son except for the effect alcohol had on them. So my son hears this guy. The meeting ends. My son turns to me. He says, I'm going to stay for the 9-month program. Can you bring me winter clothes? Something with a capital S. And I was throwing the luminaries of Alcoholics Anonymous at that boy. And it was some guy, man, you never know. That's the thing, man. You never know. Later, tomorrow, I'll be talking about step 10. It's the same thing, man. You keep it light and clear. Keep it built. Keep it connected. And you do not know. No one knows. God is the creator of time and love. God holds the copyright on time and love. We do the work. We walk the walk. Rest is on God, but God blesses the willingness. And he never wavered. He never wavered in his willingness. I went to see him after he'd been there a couple months. And he has a severe anxiety disorder. I can't remember the first time he could look you in the eye and talk at the same time. He shook. With not on drugs, he shook. So I'm sitting in the meeting room. He walks in. I say, oh, honey, you look so handsome. And I was joking when I said, you look like you've gotten taller. He wasn't joking when he said, I know, I think I've gotten taller too. Because he can look the world in the eyes, and he thinks AA did some magic with the vertical. You know what I mean? I wasn't going to dissuade that, but because he saw something, man. He saw something, right? Like Bill saw. What was it, man? And what was it about that man who was kind to me? I'd never seen kindness. And now I know what I saw. What hooked me was this. It was hope. I'd never seen it, but I could sense it, and I wanted it. And I grew up in Central California, and my father was rich and influential and powerful, and we had the kind of house that goes along with that kind of a daddy. We had a maid and a poolman and a gardener, and then the 4 hideous horsemen of alcohol entered our home, and my poor mom, and one by one, all those things left, and one of the things to go was my father and his wealth and his influence. So we were poor and hungry with the famous last name. So when I say, I know what it's like to keep a secret, I know what it's like to keep a secret. You do too. You do too. And I don't think it's any coincidence that the last help my mom let go was the gardener. You know what I'm saying? Because that's the outside. And I was one of those weird kids in the neighborhood. My hair was matted and I smelled, I wore the wrong clothes for the season. Again, I love my mother. I'm completely clear and clean of my poor mama. I bought a house with a room to take care of her when she was dying. I mean, clean and clear, man. Alcohol is a power greater than we are. A mother's love is not more powerful than alcoholism. There's only one power. Only one power. I want to kind of say, I'm sorry to tell some of you that, but that is more powerful than alcoholism. Bill Wilson himself said we have 2 higher powers, not one, God and alcohol. And I hated God. I begged God to make it stop when I was like, please, make it stop. And when it didn't stop, and all the dark stuff kept on, and the men she let in, just after the dash of her alcoholism, that is all it was. That's all right. Doesn't make me alcoholic, I'm just saying. I thought God had abandoned me. And then I got to get sober and brought to the banquet of Alcoholics Anonymous, re-family, re-foundation, re-taught. You gave me that. You gave me a seat at your banquet, and I will never be done paying back my debt to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I never want to be done paying back my debt to Alcoholics Anonymous. But I remember being a whole year, I don't remember. It doesn't matter. God will turn it into service for others or not. It's not important. There are some things that are vivid, and I remember wandering the neighborhood. I was probably about 6 years old, and I could see to the neighbor's picture window. What I saw struck me still. I'd never seen such a thing, and it must have been dinner time because they were sitting at a table together, and they had like food. We didn't have food at my house, and they were talking and laughing. And I remember a little dirty throwaway kid on the far side of that great green grass looking at that beauty. And knowing to the tips of my toes that was never going to be for the likes of me. And the very next time I saw a vision of that is when I came to you, to your banquet. And then Nebraska. And I do have to say, alcohol saved my life, man. But it's the master manipulator, the master thief, the master seducer. And it had me from the get. And I remember, man, I knew I could live for that. I was ready to be done until I found that liquid gold. And I knew I could live for that. And I was just legal trouble, just straight to get. I'm a juvie kid, lots of institutions, and I was starting to age out of the juvie system, juvenile justice system, age up into the adult system. And I mean, I think I have undiagnosed Tourette's, so I was a little afraid, we'd go down, those women are bigger than me. But whatever, I'll find my way around. But I got sent to a treatment center in Iowa, another cow in corn state. And, I hope you never need this information. But if you ever, go back drinking, I hope you don't. But if you ever get arrested, do not start the proceedings with the arresting officer like I did. I would say, excuse me, do you know who I am? Because they are nothing but rude after that. And I was savage, and I had an organ of hate for my mom and the men she let in. Just an organ of hate. And all I could say is, with what had happened to you, if what had happened to me happened to you, you'd hate too, you'd fight too, you'd do all that too. And I got to you, and you said the rudest thing, just let it go. And I'd say, did you just say just? Because we're going to have a bigger problem outside if you say that again. I mean, or like they'd say, just let it go. I'd say, you must not have heard what I said. I need to say it louder, apparently. Do you know, I just so, terminally unique. The self-pity was another, organ. You know what I mean? I felt like a shield, but it was really a wall. And this idea of God, no, God had done me wrong. I begged God for help, and it all kept happening. But here's what I know. That night as a little girl, when I begged God to make it stop, when I begged God for help, and to my little girl mind, God had abandoned me, or there was no God. That is not the reality at all. My God was with me that night. My God was crying too. And my God wasn't saying to me, I'm going to throw you away, you're nothing to me. My God wasn't saying anything like that. My God was saying this, hold on, daughter. I am sending Alcoholics Anonymous. There you will be released from care, boredom, and worry. There you will be rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence. And it was just 6 years later that I walked down those steps at 14 years old and was seen by him and felt something I couldn't explain, but I could stick to it. And I came to you at 17, finally sober, with my first sacred maybe in Sioux City, Iowa. And I was still on probation. I was on probation for almost the first 2 years of my sobriety. And I remember, here's how sick I was. I couldn't wait till I got 2 years, because that's plural. So if there was a debate in a meeting, I could say, well, I've been sober for years now. That's crazy. And I was looking up that many years ago at the first step, and it's the only one with a dash in it. And I used to teach English, and I still do not understand that dash. I don't understand what it's doing there, or its name, or why did he put it there. But I was looking at our first step, and I was thinking, you You can take that first step and not just apply it to the beginning of our sobriety, but to the end of our drinking, too. So check it out. We admitted we are powerless over alcohol. 100%. Absolutely. We take a drink, the drink takes a drink. And then that dash. And Bill wrote it so beautifully, so easily to, accept and swallow that our lives have become unmanageable. What a sweet way to say, dead on arrival or jail until sentencing. You know what I mean? He made it a little palatable, and there's not many places in the big book really where it says, here's how you know you're an alcoholic. You guys know, so it's just a few actually. Here's how you know, and even then it says you might be an alcoholic. But I'm telling you, man, if what happened to you or if what you did after the dash of your drinking was unimaginable before you took that drink, you just may be an alcoholic. And all I could see is what they did to me. I could not see that I'm the one who drank and drove. I'm the one who hit a man in a wheelchair. I'm the one who got a 4-year-old high, which is also called child abuse. But I could not see, man. I was blind to that liquid master who tells you, come on, man, I'm your only friend. Stick with me one more time. It's them. You'll be all right this time. The problem is we all have a point of no return. We've all lost many people to this disease. When I moved to Champaign, Illinois, is that funny? That's where I live now. There was this old-timer who lived there, great guy. He had this great timbre of a voice like this, and that's how he talked in the meetings, which is great. It was really effective and cool. But he would talk in iambic, trimeter, happy, joyous, and free, like that. It was really impactful anyway. But he was sober 22 years, and he drank. And he would try to get sober maybe 90 days, maybe 4 months, and then he'd go back out drinking. And every time he came back, he said, I just can't get over that I threw away 22 years. And he died recently after 25 years. Powerful. We do not know where our point of no return is until we reach it, and then it's too late. When I had to come to this idea of God, it's because of this. We take that first step. So we've now left the only God we ever were willing to give up everything before. We've now left behind the power of alcohol. We're in that place between 1 and 2. What are we going to do? We've got to find a power. And you're telling me it's this God thing? I'm way too smart for that first at 17. And then, always. But I've just gotten rid of my last choice. I'm done. That's done. And this is what you've got to offer. So I said my next sacred maybe. And that's all it takes, man. We got a broad old highway, no matter who you are, no matter what you have done, no matter what has been done to you, God and Alcoholics Anonymous will meet you there, take you by the hand, and lead you onto the broad highway. And I was the worst newcomer ever. I know you think you were probably always thinking of somebody in your home group right now. Worse. I would come late on purpose because more people look at you that way. I would wear clothes that did not belong on a stripper pole. And I'd be in the downstairs talking about everybody and then go upstairs. And I had a brain damage when I got to you, but you might think I still do. Shut up, judgy. But I would try to remember one thing out of the big book, but it's hard to hold on to the memory of it. But I wanted you to think I knew it. So here's what I would do. I'd say, happy, joyous, and free, etc. Jesus Christ! But I couldn't read the big book because for you old people, I was going to write my own version. And then it's craziness. And I couldn't get a sponsor because I couldn't find anybody smarter than me. It's such a dilemma. God dang. But people diss the fellowship. I get it, man. I'm a traditions-based member of a strong home group in Champaign, Illinois. I understand, man. But I'm telling you right here, no doubt, it's the fellowship that kept me here. And our own literature says it is a sufficient substitute for alcohol, but it is not a sufficient substitute for alcoholism. And I rode that one as far as I could. I lied about doing all the steps as long as I could. And I had no social skills, zero. I hated men, and I really hated women, so I was a little lonely. And I was like 19 years old, and I barely made it out of high school, 2 senior years. And I got a job at a nursing home, and that night I had the resident named Edith, who was a nightmare, no lie. And she'd been dumped there by her. She was a bitter and lonely old woman. I was a bitter and lonely young woman, and her kids had just dumped her there, and she'd had a pretty severe stroke. So half of her body didn't work, but the half that worked could cut you down. And I had to give her a bath, which was the worst. Here's what I called working a program. I'm going to be nice. Like, that's the best I could do. Anyway. So I'm wheeling her down the wind tunnel, so rude, she called it, and how you get a handicapped person back then anyway is first you disrobe them. And so then I transfer her to a special chair, and I secure her, and you pump them up in the air, and then position them, and then lower them into a special bathtub. So I'm going to be nice to Edith. No social skills, 19 years old, 3 years sober. So I think to myself, what would a bitter and lonely old lady want to talk about? She'd want to talk about her history, right? So now, she's in the air, naked. And I say, Edith, did you used to be pretty? She said to me, did you? And I know a master when I'm in front of one. So that bitter and lonely old woman became my best friend. I asked to have her. I'd do her fingernails. I'd make her special diabetic cookies. She hated the man of the week who'd break my heart because they kept not marrying me after a week. But I loved her. But I tell that story because of this, because God is in charge of love. I mean, I thought love was 6 foot, teeth would be nice, negotiable. You know what I mean? Because then there's always dental. If I provide that, then they're grateful. First definition of double winner. Like, that's what that is, I think. Al-Anon stole it from me, I think. But the love that woman and I had for each other was as foundational as the love that my husband of 27 years, St. Richard, that's what people in AA call him, so rude. But, oh my God. And you guys think it's a compliment. He's always cocky about it. Shut up. But anyway, I'll have to talk about in the 10th step now. But anyway, we rescue dogs. The one we have right now is a nightmare. But we think we know what love is, or it has to be this, or it doesn't fit. It's not what I want. It's not what I planned for. It's not what I demanded. Man, it's everywhere. Your sponsees, your sponsor, however it is, man, grab it. That's what we have here. It's inexplicable from the thrown away of us. And we get to you, man, and people were honorable in the meetings. Not one man made me feel some kind of creepy way. It happened in every institution I've ever been in, including my own house. And again, not unique, I'm just saying. And I was safe here, and you were honorable. So I'd sit in the back of the room, coming in late with my all that. And which if this was a women's conference, I'd make a really hilarious joke about gravity right now, but I'm not going to anyway. Anyway, so stop it. So, and I'd sit in the back of the room. I was always one of those weirdos, in the back of the room, arms crossed, all mad, my tattooed toes. I was in Iowa. Nobody sees your toes. Like, it was useless. And you think we're not listening. It's the opposite is true. We are hyper-focused, as a matter of fact. We're mostly focused on how you act the second that meeting is over. Because what we're looking for is, not here either. Not here either, man. But those people were honorable. So I could sit in the back of the room and I could hear them quote from the Big Book where it says, deep inside every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. And I hear them say that, but I think, not for me. You don't know my story, not for me. But you had been so honorable that I could believe that you believed, and that was enough for a start. I have story after story. We all do, about seconds and inches, as our old-timers talked about, and about moments that don't make sense, that they happened like they happened, that I met who I met. Unless you're here, and we are in the age of miracles. Again, here. And I'll get tied up in something like somebody's talking too long at a meeting. Like that? Is that crazy? That's crazy. I'm in a miracle amongst miracles, and I'm paying attention to they start a half hour late. I don't know. I'm just saying. I have a severe math disability. It's got a long name. I don't remember the name, but what it means is I can't function past the third grade level of math. I can't function. My brain doesn't wire like that. Nevertheless, I can recognize the magic of math. I can recognize that somewhere in the universe there's a master physicist who's taking our dark past and turning it into our greatest possession. That's magic math. And it's happening all the time. How can you explain some gang guy from prison is what changed my son? Math, man. God's magic math. That's what happens here. Just with that sacred maybe. A long time ago, one of my professional mentor, who helped me a lot, actually, in my profession, she said the funniest thing to me. She said, we come into this world alone, and we're going to go out of it alone. I thought, well, that's morbid. But she said it, I was probably 9 years sober, and every once in a while, that phrase would come back to me, and I think, why is that phrase sticking with me? What is it about that I keep taking it down and looking at it again? And then I realized, you know what? Because it's true, except for one important difference. We come into the world alone, but with God. We are going to go out of this world alone, but with God. There is only one relationship that matters. It is a relationship with the power that we claim, the power that we get to name. And I used to think God was a God of punishment. God made me for a joke. All the things that many of us think. That are impediment to coming into this, to coming to believe, to living in the light, to knowing the light will happen even if you can't feel it and it's dark all around, that the light will come again. I do think that there's some sacred song, some sacred tone for each of us. And if you are here and the things that we say sound crazy, and cannot fit you, do not fit your story or what you have done or what has been done to you, dance anyway. The song will appear. I often don't know the answer before I begin to take the step, and then the way clears, and I know, oh, this was the right way. When Paula started sponsoring me, it was almost to the month that her husband his health went down fast. And I'm a little bossy and a little organized. And I'm retired and I have all the time in the world. And so I started flying out there to help them or stay with him so she could go out and speak. And it just became this beautiful relationship with Dave and I and Polly and I. And she'd always wanted to go to Italy all her life, and she'd had to give it up because she had to stay home. A full paid trip someone else paid for, she had to give it up because of Dave's health. And I was with her when that reality hit, and the waves of the future, the new reality were hitting. And I told her, I vow to you, I will get you to Italy. And a year ago, May, we did just that. And she brought some of Dave's ashes, and we were like, where should we put them? Where should we put them? And then we thought, then the only answer to that question, where should we put them, was made obvious. And we took a day trip to Assisi and laid them in the Basilica of St. Francis of Assisi. Because no one lived those words better than Dave. And I just felt like I'm perfectly placed right here to be of service to this beautiful woman who has given all of us so much. And I'm just grateful to be a cog in the wheel, man. That's it, showing up at the front line. I have my master's degree in the incredibly unemployable. You're not even going to believe this. Medieval British history. Yes. I mean, and it was really expensive. And for just 2 letters. I mean, that's not even that great. Cheap. But my second specialization is equally unemployable. World War II. Because who doesn't want to talk about that all the time? But when I was studying for the second specialization, I read about an actual study that the United States Armed Forces did, and it ended not that long ago, actually, but it began in World War II, and it began in the muck of the worst of the fighting at the Battle of the Bulge. I need to bore you with the details, but it was awful. And the title of the study and the point of the study was this, the question, what makes soldiers fight? You can see its implications. And it began in World War II, went through Korea, Vietnam, current conflicts, and always the worst of the fighting, just the worst of it, and they pull the soldiers out who survived. They say, tell us now, while it's fresh, what made you fight? Story after story after story of these soldiers, men and women across all armed forces, said, I decided not to fight. One soldier at the Battle of the Bulge in the worst winter to hit. At that time, they were dropped in with spring clothes and abandoned, basically, going against German firepower. And one said, I decided not to. As a matter of fact, I crawled down into our foxhole made of snow and took off my boots so the cold would just take me faster. Another one who was at the back of the line in Korea, he said, my buddy and I decided we can't anymore. Better to be dead than to wait in this. So they went to the way back of the line and tried to meld into the jungle where they let the jungle take them. Current conflict, same kind of stories. So then the question was, okay, then what made you fight? To a soldier across every conflict, the answer was exactly the same. What they said was this: I knew if I gave up, my fellows would suffer. So I picked up my weapon and advanced. That is what we do here. Why is it that so much of the work that we do in the formula of the 12 steps, in the recipe, if you like to cook, of the 12 steps, you need every aspect of it to get the outcome? Why is some of it serviced with or focused on creating the bridge, mending the path, doing the service, making it clean, continuing to make it clean? It's because this basic human evolution, it's what saves our lives. That's why. And my favorite part in the big book is on page 124. It starts with this word, man, cling. It says, cling to the thought that in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession you have. They said that. I said, excuse me, my dark past? I said, yes, even yours. I was telling my friend this earlier. Mary Thayer, I'm sure, anyway, she's fabulous, and she's a friend of mine, and her profession before she retired was dealing with palliative care, death and dying. That was what she did in New Mexico with, and I'm going to get the name wrong, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She's the one who did the stages of grief. And Mary told me just recently, she said, you know, Elizabeth told me that she wishes she'd have waited to write the book, and then that became famous with only those number of stages, because Elizabeth realized there's one more stage, transcendence. When I was about 30 years sober, all my friends had always made fun of my ADD, which is so rude. And so I thought, I live where the University of Illinois is, and we think we are all that. So I thought, I'll go get tested. I mean, if I have it, it's working for me. I'm not doing anything about it, but, you know, it's interesting to get a name on it. So, I mean, it's a laboratory setting. All the PhDs, all the scientists, nobody cares how you feel, you know. So I started, and it's supposed to take 3 months, and I could tell something was going wrong because they would pull back questions and then ask me the same question, but in a different way. Because there was this one PhD psychologist, she took my family history, you know, so torture, shows all the duties sometimes after the dash of alcoholism. And she would say to me, how don't you have a personality disorder? Because I'd been tested 3 times. No personality disorder. And I didn't have an answer. I said, well, the only answer I can tell you is I got to come to Alcoholics Anonymous in the great age of miracles. And she'd shake her head. It's not in their books anywhere. One time she said, you know, there's women like you in institutions who can't feed themselves. I said, I know there are. The only difference between me and those women is I got to come to Alcoholics Anonymous. One time I said, I'm going to get through to her. So I said, look, I'm a social scientist. You're a social scientist. I understand your hypothesis. I understand your equation. I understand your factor. I am telling you there is an anomaly in your equation. That anomaly is Alcoholics Anonymous. And I almost had her, but she's like, no. Sciencey talk. And then I go in after 9 months because they kept retesting me. I think I was tricking the test. But there we were in matching clothes and dental hygiene. You know what I mean? Like, they'd not, you don't match those words with that. You know, talking about dropping my kids off at stuff. All the things, man, that we do. So I go in for the very last thing where she's going to finally tell me what it is. It's a big thesis on me. I'm pretty excited. And it's a laboratory setting. It's on the record. I'm subject A in the study, as a matter of fact, in the great Carl Medical Facility of the University of Illinois. So she tells me, you don't have ADD, you have PTSD. And though she goes, read, and here is the beauty of the magic math, people. The kind of anxiety issue that I have, the medical answer is meditation. And I don't know if you noticed, but I'm in AA. And there's a whole dang step, and 2 million of us just doing that all the time, man. I got the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Girls like me don't end up like that. And the answer even is there with me at all times. So she's reading this. It's on the record. There's scientists all around. She gets to the last page, man, but she can't help it, you know. She says out loud, it's as if you're a miracle. And she's like, oh, crap. But she didn't say crap. Because now it's on the record that a scientist has said there is such a thing as miracle, which makes me, as far as I know, the only scientifically declared miracle in the history of humankind. But I want to tell you this. I know my name. I know my family. I know who saved me. I know where I belong. And through that entire study, I gave you the credit. I'm only here because of you, which also makes you the only scientifically declared miracle in the history of humankind. Congratulations. I feel like every single day, God is throwing me a surprise party, and every single day, I am still surprised. I'm going to talk about outside issues. For a second, relax. I know you're not really supposed to, but I'm the only one with the microphone, so... Polly does it. It seems to help people. I'm jumping in, jumping back out. Okay, chill. But I have outside issues. I have tics to this day. I'm 62 years old, 45 years sober, and I have tics because of the anxiety. And I have a mood issue too. But anyway, I'm only sharing it because of this. I kept it secret from you because I thought it was an indicator of my spiritual condition. And I was ashamed and embarrassed. And then I couldn't keep it secret anymore. Either you drink, die, or tell it. And I remember, though, I was 20 years sober, and what would happen is one of them would come, the doom, or the tics, or the anxiety, and I'd just go to bed, wait it out. My friends would call sponsees, whatever. I'd say, it's come. I don't control when it comes or goes. I don't control its intensity. It's here. I'll see you on the other side. And I was in bed, 20 years sober, and God said to me, hey, you can help somebody still. Get out of bed. And I realized none of that matters. When one of them would come, a dark thought would come. Man, it's just 1 to 10,000 in a day. It's no more important than the other 9,999 to get my math right. Anyway, and dying people don't care if I'm taken, come to find out. It's just like, I can help. And so now when they show up, I don't control. They come or go as they want. I just say, oh, it's you. Buckle up, Buttercup. We're rolling in 10, My grandson Serena says we have sober feet. Isn't that how that goes? It doesn't matter the darkness coming. It doesn't matter of any of that. My feet are sober. I know what to do. I was in Rome with my friend Holly maybe 3 years ago, and we'd been, anyway, our friends were off doing the touristy things, and we had done all that. So we were just wandering around, going to churches, it's Rome, so every corner. And I'm going to tell you how I was with my son's drinking in all those years is on the good days, on the spiritual days. I knew that if the worst happened and I lost my son to alcoholism, that at least he would be at peace. I knew that if the worst happened and I lost my son to alcoholism, at least he wouldn't have to look at me and be so embarrassed. And if you've heard my story, you know that I spent a minute in the fourth dimension. And if the worst happened and I lost my son to alcoholism, I knew that I would see him again. And there were other days I begged God to save my son. And this day in Rome was a begging God day. I'm very embarrassed to say this next part. I've only now gotten to the point where I can maybe look up and say it at the same time. But Rome is a city with a high poverty rate, a high homeless person rate. And Holly and I walked into a church. I did my thing, and I walked out, and there was a young man outside begging, and I walked right past. And I didn't go 2 steps before I stopped. I'm like, what are you doing? And I turned around, and I got to his level, gave him a moment of humanity, some help, whatever help I could offer him in that with the money or the food that I had. And what I realized in that moment is this, that I cannot beg God to save the lives of my sons and then walk right past another mother's son. That somewhere in the whole world there was another mother also begging, also hoping, also dying in her soul as her son was actually dying. And maybe her prayer sent me. And though at that time I couldn't save my son, I could help that one, and that would just have to do. That's math too. I was at this PG conference, maybe 6 years ago or something, and Pacific Group has a lot of young guys. I don't know what that's about. I'm glad I didn't. Anyway, whatever. So, back in my stripper clothes days. But anyway. So, I tell the story, and my sons who would go missing, and 2 young guys about the same age as my sons, they came up because they, had mamas who were drunk. And they said, and they meant it, they said, we'll be your sons. I said, okay, did you wash your hands? But what I realized, man, again, I couldn't save my son, but I could be their mother, and that would just have to do. I'm going to end soon. Just say a few more things. For a long time, way past the time of freedom in my inventories. I couldn't find an end. I couldn't find a fourth column to the question, why didn't anybody help us? I didn't even have a feeling about it anymore, but I just wanted it clear and gone. And what I realized is this. I don't know why anybody didn't help us. All that I knew is this, that I would never be a bystander. That there would never be a child anywhere in my line of vision who would grow up and ask, why didn't anybody help us? Now that has placed me in some scary situations, but I already made my decision. It's my shot at freedom, and that is how it's going to have to be. I learned that here. It's a program of action. Sometimes I don't have a why. I just have to do. A long time ago, when I was about 18 years sober, I lost and had married St. Richard. We wanted a baby, and we wanted it badly. In June 1st of that year, my mother died. In June 20th of that year, I lost the baby. And I am sorry to tell you this. It wasn't too much pain, but it felt like too much. And I was at home, and I was hemorrhaging, and the ER nurse was saying, you have to get in here for a transfusion. And I'm sorry to say there were a couple minutes that I knew it wasn't a bad way to go. But I was a member of a home group, and they were not having any of that. They entered my home without my permission, threw some food at my kids and husband, went up, got on my bed where I was without my permission, and talked me into getting up and going to get the transfusion. And how they talked me into it was this. They said, Paula, someday someone will need this exact experience from you, and you owe it to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I have sober feet. So I went up, lived. 2 weeks later, I was at my home group. A young man raised his hand when it was time to ask for visitors. He says, I'm here because my mom died, and I don't think I can stay sober without my mom. I said, I got you. That's how it works. Cling to the thought. Do the work. Light. Keep it real. Tell the truth, even when it makes you feel silly. Tell the truth. It could help somebody. That's the whole point. I'm going to say one more thing when I sit down. When I was about 4 years sober, I was in college, undergrad, in my crappy college car, and back in Nebraska, and my sister and I decided to drive 2 days before Christmas Eve all the way from Nebraska to Washington, D.C. with my little baby niece. So, she loves shortcuts, so she would just say, let's just go east, basically. So, now it's past midnight. We're in the middle of Iowa, and it's 0 degrees out, and my car stops. No heat, no engine, no lights anywhere, no road sign, no help, and we're in some real danger. And my baby niece is in some real danger. So the stupid plan is I was going to get out of the car and guess where to walk. But just at that moment, on the only hill in Iowa, come these headlights. And my sister, who's relatively stable, said, oh, good help. Me, oh no, axe murderer. And it was this farmer, which, outside issue, but if there's actually a zombie apocalypse, you want a farmer on your team. Those guys can do anything. So he says, what's wrong? We're like, we don't know. The car just stopped. So I happened to have a wire coat hanger and duct tape in my car. Like I was going to kidnap somebody. Anyways, he fixed my engine with those two things. And so now it's one day before Christmas Eve in the dark of night, and he's walking back to his truck, and we're like, hold on, we want to pay you. He goes, no. We're like, wait, you saved our lives. We want to pay you. And he said, take it as a present from him. And I remember when I was at that point between first and second step, and you were telling me it's God, and I'm like, it can't be that, it can't be that. I thought I tried that, it can't be that. But all the other doors were shutting, and there was only one left. And it was that one. And so I started like many of us do. I went to my counselor in the institution I was in. Maybe not exactly. But in the halfway house, I said, okay, if there's a God, why did all those bad things happen to me when I was a little girl? And she said, oh, baby, God didn't make those things happen. Faulty and broken human will made those things happen. But now God has given you Alcoholics Anonymous to try to help you mend those things. So if you think you are an outsider, if you think what has been done to you or what you have done is too much, you can see now that I know. So I am just asking you to say maybe and take it as a present from Him. Thank you.